Talk of the Now podcast. I am your host, Gene, and we're back with number Jason. What's up, Jason?
Yeah, it's number Jason. Yes, that's me.
I started to call you number two, but I just said Jason.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time. Anyway,
Number Jason.
yeah, doing well.
You're not number two, you're just Jason.
Depends on the day.
Cohort. My cohort.
Mm,
Um,
I know nothing. Anyway,
so Jason, what it do? How are you?
I'm hanging in there, man. Just living.
Yeah.
Nothing much.
You've had I know you've had a few things you're very excited about some trees you planted last weekend, right?
Yes, as I know you're getting older. When Arbor Day is your favorite day of the year. No,
Tree planter.
yes, I planted 6 Colorado blue spruce and 1 weeping cherry blossom.
I have no idea what those are, but I'm glad and thankful because
Cherry blossom's what blooms in,
well, I do know what a cherry blossom is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Then this is just the weeping willow kind of version, so it's just got the and the Colorado blue spruce are like when they get bigger, there'll be a bluish green Christmas tree looking evergreens. So
To be a person that's into woodworking, I must say that it's kind of a shame of the amount of little information I know about trees in general. Like even when I am not a seasoned, no pun intended, woodworker, but other than knowing about pine, oak, and cherry, and a lot of the I'm still in the research phase of learning that other than knowing, we all know that mahogany is good thanks to Anchorman, but
rich mahogany, yes,
rich mahogany. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Glad you planted some trees. I got to plant a few more thujulas. See, I can't even say the word because you sound like you have a lisp when you say thujulas.
Yes.
Say that word without sounding like you have a lisp.
It's like when you say the word thinner, it also sounds like you're saying sinner with a lisp.
Thinner.
I'm just a thinner. Anyway, sorry. Sorry. All the hits are coming tonight, boy.
I had a birthday recently. We won't say what day.
Yeah,
because I'm not that type. This is what I got.
Very nice. Yeah,
familiar with that work of George Harrison's.
Yep.
All things must pass.
Hmm.
Now, what I've discovered in my aging days is
you forget things. No.
An old adage that not all things are created equal. I mean, we all learned it when we were 4 years old, but what I've learned about this is that all things must pass. You would think, okay, I want to ask for the CD so I can download it and put it on my computer or whatever. But oh no. This bad boy has had about 4 different renditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever studied this, but I was looking at it, I just wanted, I want all things past CD. So I got it. But this is the 50th anniversary, Jason. However, it is the 50th anniversary remix.
Oh, goodness.
So it's not I thought it was going to be a remaster. And you probably know much more about remixing than I do, but when I'd heard and read, this is not a George Harrison sign off. This was done 2020. And it's basically, I think, his son and some producers getting together and saying, let's refine this album.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't sound bad. I just didn't think that it was really what I wanted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what I did find is that the 2014 version, which oddly enough is not very easy to find. I think I had to order it through Discogs or something like that, whatever that website is.
Oh, yeah.
I found a version of that, and I had to spend, I think, $18 to get it, and a used version. But that 2014 is simply a remaster of like the original whatever's, like George Harrison did not sign off on that, but it's just a remaster. It's not any kind of because apparently the one that he signed off on in 2000 is still not the best version. and then there's one from like the 1980s when they first came out with CDs, and that is apparently a terrible version to get. So all the research I said, so people, if you want to get the All Things Must Pass, in my opinion, go with the 2014. But apparently you'll appreciate this, Jason. If you look on the Reddits and everything, they will tell you the best version to get is the vinyl album, the original cut vinyl album. From like, I guess this 1973 or whatever year, whatever it was made. And people say that that's the one that you have to find the most rich tone.
Yeah, the vinyl is always going to be the most rich tone, but yeah.
But apparently George Harrison said, like in 1999 or 2001, when he was going through his own remaster during that period, that he felt like there's a little bit too much Phil Spector's Wall of Sound in it, because Phil Spector produced it. I don't know if you knew that, but so he sort of took some of that out, I think, in his little remaster he did. But the gurus that I found online that are really into this album, the best that I could tell, that 2014 version of the CD might be one of the better ones to get. Unless I guess you want to record record your vinyl or whatever.
Just listen to
so you can listen to it digital. Like you want to go down the road and hear it,
you lose something. You lose something in the compression, though. That's the thing.
I mean, I like to hear music when I'm going down the road, so I need to have a digital copy.
Yeah. It's just always going to sound warmer and richer on the vinyl. That's just the nature.
No doubt
of it. But yeah.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. But apparently also, this is the funny part too, that there was, somebody said that the George Harrison website for a period of time in the early 2000s or something had what is considered the best digital version of it you can get, but you can't get that anymore. So you have to go find a bootleg, somebody that put it on whatever one of those deals are,
At some point you're like, okay, I'm okay with the version I have. It's like you can be an aficionado to an extent, but then you're like, okay, this is one album.
Yeah. I guess my point being is that I'm kind of amazed in researching this, how far down the rabbit hole you can go with some of these albums.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like they do that with movies too. Like there's especially
Criterion Collection. Yes.
For like for Disney for example, because animation, is a whole art form. So like if you're wanting to find, say for instance, Cinderella. Yeah. Well, there's several cuts and several copies and several renditions that have been made of a lot of those old Disney classics, but a lot of it depends on what your preferences for how they did the color remix and all that kind of stuff, and how they did the sound remix and all that kind of. Sometimes they did bad in one area and sometimes bad in another area, and sometimes they got a Goldilocks, and sometimes you got to just take the best of what you could find. It's wild to read some of these rabbit hole things that people.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to art forms like that. It's just, and then you go back and you watch, say, all right, like Star Wars, that kind of thing. Everybody has their favorite version or whatever. Well, I watched an original 1977 print in a theater of Star Wars one time. It looked horrible, but it was original. That's how it was, put in the movie theater.
Right.
So, there's some things that are good original, and then some things are like, yeah, okay, there's a reason they improved it a little, here and there.
Right.
So,
yeah. We won't go down that rabbit hole of the Star Wars thing, but I do wish that George Lucas, they might have just done a few, touch-ups, if you will, instead of adding certain things. But that's a lot of people's opinion, probably.
I mean, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
For the
it's kind of like
time,
you can like, it's like you can repair the body paint on the car, but you don't have to put a huge pinstripe down it.
and glitter and
yeah. No, we didn't really need flames on that side of the car. We just didn't need the flames.
Yeah, no.
It looked good the way it was. It looked good with the blue and the yellow.
For the longest time, we only had the VHS copies of the originals back in the day. So I remember being a little shocked when the special editions came out, and we all went to the theater. We're like, wow, that looks a little bit whoa, what's that? And then some of it was great, like adding stuff in the background, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think of the Mos Eisley scene where they're coming up to the Mos Eisley and you just see extra stuff in the background flying by. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Contact stuff, but adding the
Extra dance scenes,
the stupid band thing at Jabba's palace.
It's like a different movie stuck into a movie.
It's like, why? And just overdone with the effects. I get it. You guys invented most of this stuff, but you don't have to show it all off in one scene.
Right.
You know, but
yeah, I guess that's what
it's not up to me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I mean, it is common, you know, you just have to use your, I guess, I don't know, maybe the fans will get what they want one day. I mean, they can't, I don't know.
Probably never, actually.
Maybe never. Oh, well, not our problem, Jason.
No, it isn't. No, much as we like to try to talk about it, it's still not our problem.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing that I, looked into lately. And I tend to be the kind of person that's not too picky on that sort of stuff because I'm not a sound geek. But when it comes to the music thing, but I do try to get like, I just one of the things that I've noticed you have to tiptoe around is like the whole remix and remaster thing, especially if it's been done in the last 15 years, because sometimes I like the dirty, you know what I mean? Sometimes I kind of like the
imperfection.
Yeah, the imperfection in a sound. Sometimes I don't want George Harrison or Paul McCartney or whoever's voice to be the most prominent thing in the song if it never was to begin with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yep. I mean that can sound good as a one-off. It can sound good as an extra. Like if you bought a CD and it had like some extra outtakes. I mean, that's fine because it's a different version of the song or whatever, But like for instance, okay, let's talk about the Get Back song. My favorite version is the version that you can get on the Beatles Greatest Hits Volume 2 or whatever it is, the 2 CD, where they're standing over the balcony, looking down. The blue comes in a blue packaging.
Yep.
That Get Back one has the part where he goes, woo, get back, Jojo, and it has that last verse in it. That's my favorite version of that song. But there's about 3 or 4 or whatever other versions of that song. And, depending on the CD you buy, because that song, I believe that song is different on the Let It Be album than it is on the Greatest Hits one. I could be wrong, but I'd have to look into that. Anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
agreed.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. For instance, I searched for the Beach Boys album forever, and now I've got 3 copies of it because when I find it, I buy it. Original pressings of Beach Boys 2020 from 1969.
I'm guessing Pet Sounds is their most valuable vinyl CD you could find.
I mean, depends on what it is, when it was pressed, what kind of thing, that kind of deal. I would say the one I've been looking for is the most rare.
But not necessarily the most.
No, because I still get. I mean, like I paid a little bit too much for it. The first one I found, I paid $15 for, and it literally was the only one I could find anywhere. So, and I walked in there, now $15. I'm like, do you realize how rare this is? But and then the second time I paid $35 for it. So, it depends on where you buy it and who knows what about it. It's one of those kind of albums. But
is it Sgt. Pepper's? Something like one of those versions is like one of the most valuable albums to get or something like that.
I guess. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with the Beatles because just like a lot of bands back then, they had so many issues of different things go on that you get kind of lost in it. You're like, okay, wait, what album was that on? I thought that was on this one. No, that was the thing that the record company just released because they wanted to release another album and they just stuck it on this. Beach Boys had a lot of those. Like Endless Summer, that album from Beach Boys. Love that album, but it's all stuff from other albums. So,
Yeah, I don't know why they did that. Like, I guess sometime in the 70s, they started just, you come out with an album, these are the 10 songs, no matter where you are, but that's it. But like, I know the Beatles did that too. Like in the '60s, sometimes you would get you get a UK version, then they had an American version. It's like is all the audience that different?
Where it was pressed. Yeah.
It's like except like on the there's a version like you get the songs you get on one album you don't get on the other album. It's weird. I when I bought that George Harrison 2014 CD I talked about a minute ago, this is pretty funny. On the Discog, sometimes I guess the seller makes a certain limit on what you have to buy, so you might have to purchase up to like $25 to get anything.
Hmm.
And so I was because my total was like $18. Like, all right, well, let me see if I can find something for $6.99 or $7.99. So I was looking through it, and I found Genesis Abacab. And then when the mail came, or no, about 2 hours after I'd ordered it, I was like, wait a minute, let me go back and look. And I thought I'd bought the CD, but I ended up buying the vinyl. So now I have the vinyl version of Abacab.
That's good though. I mean, it wasn't what you thought you bought, but at least you got something still pretty cool. You know,
I just thought it was funny because for like the first few hours or day or so, I thought I was getting the CD, and I was like, wait a minute, did I order the CD or did I order the vinyl? so anyway.
Yeah, there's some things like, like I've gone to record shows a lot. Last one I went to was on Memorial Drive at North Hairston back in the old hood. Took my father-in-law with me. And you never know what you're going to find. And then like people had like, apparently these exist, original pressing Soundgarden, Super Unknown, that kind of stuff. Like from the 90s, like from back when we heard them, when we were only buying CDs, there were places that pressed those vinyl. So those are extremely valuable. Mm-hmm. Because they just weren't pressing vinyl. Like Pearl Jam's 10, I saw an original pressing.
Early 90s stuff.
And I was like, what the heck? And you look at $2,500, like, oh, okay. Super Unknown was 7,000 because it was autographed by everybody. And obviously, one of them is dead. So that jumped the value up. But then, like rare stuff you don't see a lot is Iron Maiden. Like actual original pressing Iron Maiden, you don't see as much of just because it got worn out, I usually grab those when I see them. I'll grab like, you hear about albums and you're just like, oh, I want a copy of that. And it's mostly just stuff I want a copy of. It's not going to be something I'm going to resell. I only resold that one album, which was sealed copy of Rumors, original pressing from Fleetwood Mac, and I bought it for $28 and made $350 on it. So
pretty good.
Again, I already have an original pressing that I would listen to, so I was like, well, this one will be one that I either keep for a while or see if anybody wants it. But Discogs is a good resource if you're looking. You can get their app, and if you're out at a record show, that's the value of the record. Is what's on Discogs because they got all the editions. They got your spine number because before they had barcodes, it was that spine label number, and that was the issue of the record. So half the time you got to like go blind trying to look at this worn out spine on a record to see what the actual number is. But that's a good way to check. And I've seen people that have had stuff priced way too high, especially at like an antique mall or something where they think just because it's old it's worth a lot. It's like, no, your Engelbert Humperdinck is not worth $12. Like that's a $2 album, dude. Or your Barry Manilow, one of 40 million pressed that year, is not worth $18 just because it's old.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful when you're looking at vinyl stuff, and that's why I like Discogs as a resource for value. It's it's pretty good.
I was just thinking that about when you said that about the 90s. I don't listen to them much as lately, but they're one of my favorite bands, and I don't know that they even did a vinyl pressing of Achtung Baby in 1991. Did they do one? Okay.
Yes, they did.
Did they do an American one?
That I don't know.
I'm sure they did overseas, but
note to self: something to try to find for Gene. Anyway,
they may not have done vinyl pressings. They probably did for Joshua Tree, but I'm not sure.
I have two of them.
You do? Okay. I might have one actually. I'm not sure.
I thought I gave you one actually. Yeah.
You may have. And I'm not sure if they did one for Zooropa or Pop. I'd be surprised if they did one because the one was 1993 and the other was 97, I think.
If they did, they are European.
Mm.
And they're just, they're for DJs and people that still flipped wax in that situation,
Yeah, you did find me an Octong Baby vinyl. I do have one.
I have, I've got War, I've got Boy,
Mm-hmm.
I've got a bunch of them actually. I try to pick up U2 when I see it.
I don't think I have any. You've bought me a few. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I have to go back and see what I have.
And none of them were really hugely expensive. You just don't see them very much.
Right.
Because most people aren't giving them up,
Yeah. For a while there, I was a big U2 fan, and man, what I learned was, especially in that early to teen 2000s, boy, they started going over. That's when bands started going overboard with all their reissues and memorabilia that you could buy for stuff. And I was like, man, I'll go broke trying to buy everything that they. I think the last big thing I bought was the Octong Baby. That was one of my favorite albums, and they had a 20th anniversary of it, I think. And it came with like 6 CDs, and it had all kinds of versions of different songs on it, like Mysterious Ways and stuff. And but yeah, that thing I think cost me it may have cost me $100 because it had a big booklet and everything.
Yeah, they can get up there in price like that. I think the last special edition of something I bought was probably In Excess's Kick 30th anniversary album. I bought that one.
More than 50?
It was 30 something bucks, I think.
Okay.
I bought it just because I was like, you know what? If I want to listen to Kick, I'm going to listen to that one because it's the 180 gram vinyl.
Yeah.
That way I can keep my original copy I have safe and kind of, not playing it as much. I did buy a 12-inch single of Never Tear Us Apart. I found that's what I bought at that record show on Memorial Drive. The 12-inch singles actually kind of have a good value to them too.
Yeah.
Those are if you ever see those, they're kind of good to pick up if there's something you recognize. Like I've come across a lot of Duran Duran.
For more vinyl, for more NXS information, by the way, you can go to our podcast. We did an entire podcast on NXS.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason.
No, there's like if you're in like an antique store or something, somebody's got one of those crazy unorganized, non-alphabetized, which drives me nuts, bins of records. Always want to leave them a note saying, hey, you can pay me $40 and I'll alphabetize all your records. Because it just frustrates me. I'm like, just at least make an effort. But if you're just flipping through the stacks and you come across 12-inch vinyl, pick it up because it can be worth a lot more than you think. I picked up an Iron Maiden one that's just the Number of the Beast song, and it's in like the soft pack, so it's just the paper cover, and I picked it up for like $18, and I think it's worth somewhere in the $60 or $70 range. So you just never know what you're going to find. Sometimes if you think it's odd looking and you think it's strange that they did that, like pick it up because it's going to be worth a lot. I picked up a promo copy of one of the XTC albums, and that's worth a lot more money because it's the promo copy.
Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to remember XTC's big song that they had.
They had a few.
Yeah,
we're just making plans for Nigel. They had Senses Working Overtime.
That's
that
right.
song.
Senses
They had, what was the other one they had?
Anyway,
people are yelling at me right now. Oh, they had a
Hey.
Runaway is another good song. Oh, run away. That's a good song. Just a very good progressive, British band. Yeah, they're kind of.
I'm sure we mentioned them on our New Wave podcast that we did,
which you can check in our back issues of our podcast.
Yes. Check the archives, people.
Yes.
The thing I was going to say though about those special editions. Oh man, if you get like the top one, a lot of times though, that has the vinyl and it has the CD,
And a
and
book.
it has all the booklets,
Yeah.
you know, and it may even have a DVD or two.
Yeah, some kind of weird thing in there. Yep.
And man, those things can get up in the hundreds sometimes. The Pink Floyd apparently had a big one that came out recently that was like, I don't even know if it came out. I think it did come out, but it's like $500.
Must be the Dark Side of the Moon one.
I don't remember all that was on it, but I just remember seeing it like, I'm out. I'm not gonna be able to buy that.
No, I'm a fan, but that's a little ridiculous.
I'm just, yeah. Well, a lot of times yeah, go ahead.
No, after Neil Peart died, trying to find, Rush albums seemed to be impossible. But then I stumbled upon, like a week after he died, I stumbled upon a pristine original pressing of 2112. I was like, what the heck? Somebody said, okay, I'm buying this, like now I've got like 3 copies of 2112, four copies of Moving Pictures, including one sealed original. Yeah, I've got a ton of those. I've got a couple of their new albums that I bought. So it's new vinyl. It's like brand new vinyl. Stuff of their newer stuff. I did buy the Snakes and Arrows album, the tour that we went to, Gene. So there's, you just have to kind of like, if you're a fan, buy the stuff, but it's just very rarely do I need like all of the extras that go with it, because then, you're going to want to open it and look at it and do stuff. Well, the minute you open it, your value goes down. It's just like,
I'm kind of a person that's, I mean, it's okay. Yeah. I mean, everybody has their preferences. Just my own personal preference is that I tend to like just the version that was put out that the band originally put out. Like, if you buy Led Zeppelin 4,
it's the one that was out. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't necessarily, I mean, I don't mind going back and listening to, this is a special anthology edition that has outtakes of When the Levee Breaks. I'll listen to it, but it's rare that I hear those and say, oh yeah, I like that version much better than the one I grew up with.
It's the oddity of it. It's the oddity of having like that little, I've got a little extra, it's like, did it really change your music experience to, hear somebody cough and they shouldn't have coughed, or drop something in the room, like, like, I don't need that.
And some people get into the whole mono versus stereo thing as well,
Yeah, there's arguments.
Yeah.
There are arguments that mono is sometimes the better way to look at it. Depends on the music. It depends on what it is. It depends on who produced it.
Then you have to make a whole playlist, because I like this song in mono, but I like that song in stereo.
Yeah, I know.
Better.
But what's funny is you can tell a difference when you do listen to them. It's like, oh wow, you can tell a difference. It's like, it's not coming out of one speaker though. That's the other thing. People like, it's mono, it's only going to come out of the right channel. No, it just means the same thing's coming out of both channels. That's what that.
I meant to ask you this. Did you ever look into finding a copy of Dire Straits' Love Over Gold?
Yep, got
vinyl? It. Okay, did you listen to it?
Yep.
And I asked because I kept reading, because I'm a Dire Straits fan. I don't have that album yet, but I became a big fan about 2 or 3, probably 3 years ago, and I bought their first album, which is amazing, by the way. And can't remember the name of that one. Might just be self-titled. But everything, again, I went down the rabbit hole to research for their albums, and everybody was saying that Love Over Gold, apparently there is a album version that is one of the best albums to listen to on vinyl.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, well, it was pretty good. I just, I'd have to compare it with a bunch of other stuff. I mean, it's hard to beat anything Alan Parsons produced. His stuff was good. I mean, yeah, there's something to be argued for the Criminal, what's his name, Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. Man's rotten in prison now. But like, there's different things, and I honestly think that I don't like one style of recording, of like studio work of a production. I like multiple things, because with one band it may not sound as good as it does on the other. It's like you said, you kind of like what you like from the original. If I'm used to hearing it a certain way, then that's the song for me. It's not, oh, I've got this new version now that has all this extra. No. It's kind of like, it's the argument between live and studio recorded. There are some songs that I've only ever heard of live, and then when I hear the studio recording, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. Like Any of Frampton Comes Alive, any of those songs you listen to studio recorded, you're like, just doesn't have the same pull as it does when you've got a audience and he's playing off the audience, you know. So it just depends.
This is I just pulled up randomly on the Googles. And I found this from subjectivesounds.com. It talks about that Love Over Gold album review. And the first paragraph, this guy says, while some may question if 5 songs can be considered an album, there is no doubt that Love Over Gold, Dire Straits' 4th studio album from 1982, is a quintessential album experience. While each of the 5 songs stand out on their own, when you listen actively to the intended album structure, you'll encounter a rich and rewarding experience that will have you coming back to this incredible release.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's a good way. But it's kind of like it's like, I mean, 2112 is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Long
I don't see an
song.
author. Sorry, I don't see an author that says that. I give credit, but I don't see an author's name for that. Anyway, go ahead.
But like those things like that, you know, a lot of reasons why people always thought Rush was a geekier band is because of albums like 2112, where it's like these long 20-minute songs of these narrative things. But I mean, you know, you talk about masterpieces of work, listen to Xanadu from Rush. It's pretty amazing, the sound that was done in that, you know, and just the normal release of it as a song. There's all kind of arguments for different ways, but like I said, a different band sounds different with different kind of production. So, you know, Mutt Lange had his own way of producing, you know, which we're a fan of. One of his top bands, Def Leppard. So, you know, like he had a way of producing things.
Rick Rubin is a big name too, isn't he?
Yeah.
He has some interesting sound. He's done he may have some of the largest spectrum of different type of artists.
Yeah. He's I mean, it is an art form. Production in the studio is an art form in its own. You're taking somebody else's art and making it sound good.
Yeah.
Know?
Yeah. Well, you are a sound guy, and sometimes I wonder, watching the Beatles stuff. I mean, the 5th Beatle, in some ways, to me, kind of seems like it was George Martin.
Yeah, that's a good argument for that. Yeah.
You know,
I would agree. I would agree with you on that. That's because that was their sound. I mean,
could they have done that sound without him? Is what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
They could have. I mean, they could have pulled off some of it, but
not. They have been
no, they wouldn't have been as marketable without him.
Especially the Rubber Soul and Up albums. You know.
Yeah.
Or whatever one came. Yeah.
They, you know, and the Beatles a lot of times were a one-take band. They literally did most of those things in one take.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, especially their earlier stuff. Now, granted, the earlier stuff wasn't as complicated.
Right.
It was, you know, poppy kind of, you know, 60s music. But they're like, let's just do this, record it, boom, we're done. Which is pretty amazing when you think about some of those hits and how much they're a part of our, you know, musical lexicon now.
Well, you know that. Do you have no point? Because I want to make a point.
I don't know.
I was hearing somebody talk today on a show about this, as far as how there's a big lack of creativity when it comes to the entertainment arts nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know it, whether it be movies, music, or fine art, or whatever have you, even plays. Excuse me. But one of the points he was making is, especially in the music business, that a lot of times you have people that play new artists. Like, you could find YouTube videos. Let's say you want to learn to play Xanadu, or you want to learn to play, you know, the whole 2112 album, or you want to learn to play Flight by Night. You or I mean, if we watched enough video and we practiced enough, we might actually be able to get it down.
Yeah, maybe.
But maybe. I wouldn't. You know,
it wouldn't sound like that though.
But you might be able to get the chords down and all that, you know. And you've seen all these YouTube videos where like some random 12-year-old is going, you know, up and down the fretboard. But the point is that, but they're not producing anything. They're reproducing these things that, you know, blah blah blah. And my thought was this, and you might agree with me, is that a lot of creativity, like say the Beatles, it's kind of like you can't be the top DJ in New York City or LA or wherever, like somebody like Rick Dees back in the day. You can't just go from being an 18-year-old to being that. And a lot of like the Beatles, for instance, they had to go through all the poppy stuff you mentioned before they got to Sergeant Pepper's. They had to get, you had to cut your chops. You had to go out there at 15 and sing the blues and gig to 5 people, to 2 people, to a town hall, and all you played was Little Richard and, rockabilly. And that's what you did for your first 5 or 6 years until you understood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can't just, you're not going to fall out of bed and start playing, whatever. You're not going to do the White Album on your first album. You're not going to do. You're not falling out of your bed playing Helter Skelter. You're not falling out of your bed playing, Let It Be.
Right.
Even as kind of pop, slow song as that song is, it's on albums that are. It's on the album that's, among one of their more masterpieces. So, I just there's.
So I guess the point in a lot of ways is like yes, you can learn all these things. Like you and I can watch YouTube videos on how to fix our car, but that doesn't make us a master mechanic or somebody that's going to invent an engine. You know what I mean?
More resources now than there used to be that make it seem easier to do things, but it's still just, well, Solomon said it, right? There's nothing new under the sun. And there's truth to that. Nobody's inventing new chords. They're just finding different ways to put them together. But they were always influenced by somebody else. I mean, we know the most obvious example of somebody being influenced by another band is Greta Van Fleet.
Right.
I call them Greta Van Zeppelin for that reason. I mean, you could go to a concert of theirs and think, man, I'm listening to a whole night of new Led Zeppelin music. I mean, it really does sound almost identical. It's like, but is that bad? No, because it's still their music.
Right.
That's a case of like they took an influence and did their own songs in the image of that influence. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the whole movie industry where they start remaking things or making things that were TV shows into movies and they're not anywhere near what the movie was, what the TV show was, that kind of thing. You watch like say 21 Jump Street, if you could suffer through that movie. And anybody that watched the TV show is like, this was not a funny show. This was like drama. Why are you making it a comedy? Like,
right.
I don't know.
And I think that a great example to me too is just a lot of times, like you said, you're not reinventing the wheel. Paul McCartney, when he wrote "Let It Be," he's not reinventing the wheel.
No,
but he's putting his own spin on it, and that's the key. To be able to put a an attractive spin on your art form is the key. For instance, Disney did it time and time again back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s on with a lot of their animation stuff. Like, Alice in Wonderland is an old story, and all he did was he just bought the rights to it and put his spin on it.
For that matter, Little Mermaid is a whatchamacallit tale from Copenhagen.
Yeah.
From Denmark.
You could take Bear Rabbit. You could take any of the Brothers Grimm stories. And if you're putting the right spin on it and you're putting the right, whatever onto it, you could even make it a different story, but just like that story. I mean, people do that all the time with Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. It's like, it's so funny to think about some of these musical masters and these giants in rock and roll that we know. They didn't invent new chords, Well,
like Dire Straits, for instance. I mean, the what's his name?
Mark Knopfler.
Yeah, I mean, he would tell you that people like Chet Atkins were his influence.
Yeah, definitely.
He's just like, but he's doing, he learned Chet Atkins and he probably learned rockabilly and learned country music, but then he's like, oh, well, I have an idea, like an architect. He's like, you know what? If I do this angle this way and do it that way, that's his own new thing.
Yep.
And I think that's what's missing a lot of times when you see somebody that appears to be a virtuoso or a up and coming whatever, is that you still got to put the work in. You still got to put the mileage in.
Yeah.
To get to that point.
Yeah, it is. It's true. I mean, every now and then one will rise from the crud and be like blow you away. You're like, okay, they've got their own thing. They're not like a repackaged version of something else. They're actually their own thing. I've found those occasionally, but it is rare. There's just so much, there's so many ways to listen to music now, and there's so many opportunities for people to put music out that it doesn't take as long of work as it used to. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It used to be a lot of work to get your song on a radio or on something like you had to have a record company,
right?
Yeah, just record it and make it sound decent, and then you had to have a record company had to release it on the radio. You couldn't do it. Like I'm pretty sure you couldn't do it legally at one point.
And I know in this day and time it's an obvious answer, but distraction may play a key into it as well. Because if this was 1990, your distractions would be to watch, like if you're trying to be an artist, you're trying to come up with a new song or an album because you're, 23.
Yeah.
Okay, you could grab a book off the shelf and distract yourself. You could go watch TV for 3 hours, or
make sure to set your VCR. Yeah.
Nowadays you could be distracted by a gazillion things and not even get around to making your song.
I know. Yeah. It is different. It is different. Like I said, every now and then somebody rises to the top.
Mm-hmm.
But they also rise to the top in your own mind because they remind you of something else too. That's the other thing. I've noticed that. Like, what was the artist's name that was country? Jamie Johnson. You listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has a song called Somewhere Between Haggard and Jones for a reason, because he sounds like them. Like Merle Haggard, like crazy, like very close to Merle Haggard. It's like, what the, when you listen to him. Things like that,
I don't know if we'll get another, if we'll ever get like another Crosby, Stills, Nash, or if we'll get another Doobie Brothers or another, I mean, I realize bands like Zeppelin come along once in a lifetime, or that talent level, or Rush, but like even back in the day, like I'm just using the Doobie Brothers or somebody like that as an example, very, very talented folks, but there were also a lot of other bands that could kind of do what they did. For instance, America had a similar sound to me in a lot of ways, but
to the early Doobie Brothers,
yeah.
I mean, I'm with
but
you.
But nowadays, I don't know if we'll get another band like that. I mean,
I watched an interesting thing on, I think it was on HBO or Max or whatever, called Yacht Rock, a documentary, DOCK.
I've heard about it. Yeah.
Wow. Totally opened up my eyes to that music that I thought was all just the playing in the grocery store kind of music back in the day, and because Michael McDonald, Christopher Cross, and Kenny Loggins and some of the members of Toto were actually involved and like narrated a lot of it. Because it's a term for music that we didn't even have. Nobody called that yacht rock. It was just
we grew up calling it soft rock usually, right?
That's going to be playing on B98.5, right? But to hear Christopher Cross, he's like having this rock style lifestyle, and I'm thinking like, you listen to his music, and I'm like, literally, I'm sitting in a waiting room somewhere. Like, really? You wrote that song when you were high? Like, what?
There's a great interview with him on Rick Beto's.
But he's not the same. He's not the kind of guy you think he is. That's what's kind of interesting. It's like we hear these things and we think this stuff is all just kind of this very beige music, but it actually had some good. I mean, Michael McDonald was a genius, or is a genius, but he gets made fun of all the time, Right. But he came in there and changed the Doobie Brothers sound when he started getting involved, So I don't know. There's Crosby, Stills, and Nash. For that matter, there was bands that kind of faded into the kind of background, like the Byrds, who had their own sound, like Paul Revere and the Raiders, for that matter. Like great bands that had a bunch of great stuff, but nobody talks about them. They talk about the Beatles from back then, or they talk about, but there were equally great stuff back then that just kind of, that's what I'm saying. Music has so much depth to it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that, especially during that period, like, music kind of went through waves of sounds. Like that sound you hear of the Beatles, like the Help album, for instance, or whatever, you could find there were a lot of people. They weren't necessarily imitating the Beatles. They were just all kind of making a similar sound. Like Gary and the Pacemakers is a great example of somebody. If you want to hear that, you might actually think it's a Beatles song, but it's just kind of the way that the music sounded.
There's a band called The Circle, spelled Cyrkle from back then. They had a song called Red River Ball, and they had another one called Turn Down Day.
Right.
And you're like, that's a Beatles song. Well, they were recording in the studio, and John Lennon came over there and gave them some advice. So yes, there's some Beatles influence in there directly. He's actually
I was going to say with the psychedelic era,
Yep.
Because they were all trying to experiment on certain ways of doing things. Like you could find a psychedelic Rolling Stones album, and then 5 years later, it's not psychedelic.
Definitely. Just all kinds of bands, from that era, that late 60s, early 70s was definitely its own time. Aside from the Laurel Canyon bands, there was, just the other stuff that just came out, and it's just like, whoa, and you're thinking that sounds like, well, that's the reason it sounds like them is because they were playing at somebody's house in that canyon with some other people one time, and they're like, oh, I like that sound. I'm going to do a song like that, So it's like, it's an interesting period.
It maybe we'll see how things go in the next 10 years or so, but it's just interesting the variety of music that you had back then that was just like on a shelf. Like you could find somebody that had everything from Parliament to Charlie Pride on somebody's shelf, to Fleetwood Mac and ABBA. They'd be on the same shelf for some.
I know, because they're the same era. They had during the disco era, there was Fleetwood Mac as well, and Led Zeppelin for that matter. You're like, how do those two exist at the same time?
But now it's like, which auto tune do you want to hear? None. Thank you.
God, no.
Anyway, we won't go there.
It's time to strange talking in sort of music that yes, you wrote it, but you're really just kind of talking through it. Taylor Swift. That I have to hear a lot of that because my wife's a fan. But you're like, but you used to be country, and you were a decent country artist. What the heck, Anyway,
I'm not going to say nothing about that. I don't want the Swifties coming after me, Jason. So
well, that's all right. I've already got a target on my back now. It's okay. I'm gonna wind up, stuck somewhere where I can't get out. It's like hearing nothing but
the views. Never mind. All right, Jason.
Exactly. Well, the views expressed on this are not necessarily
Jason's. All right, but anyway, that's good talk, Jason. I didn't think
good talk.
We had no plans of going that way, everybody, and not everything we talk about is about music and albums and whatever.
But we love it, so that's why we talk about it, right? So
I guess so.
It's what we're talking about now. There you go.
Well, good one, Jason, and thanks everybody for joining us. You have any other thoughts or prayers, Jason?
Like and subscribe. Somebody has to say it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Bye, Jason.